Residents in southern Greece mobilised to help survivors of a shipwreck in the Mediterranean, which killed at least 79 migrants.
UK former Prime Minister Boris Johnson is found to have lied to Parliament over lockdown parties following a damning report. Serbian trucks are stopped from entering Kosovo after claims Serbian forces kidnapped 3 policemen.
The European Central Bank raises its interest rates by 0.25% in a bid to reverse inflation to its 2% medium target.
A search and rescue operation continued overnight for any migrants who may have survived the sinking of an overcrowded fishing boat off the Greek coast. As the enormity of the tragedy became clear, at least 79 dead and hundreds more thought to be missing, residents in the southern city of Kalamata have been trying to help the survivors.
Έχουμε συγκλονιστεί. Το αντιλαμβάνεστε. Αυτό είναι κάτι το οποίο δεν μπορεί να το συλλάβει ο νους του ανθρώπου. Όλοι είμαστε γονείς, είμαστε άνθρωποι και όταν ακούμε τέτοια πράγματα να συμβαίνουν, προφανώς τρασόμαστε και προβληματιζόμαστε για όλα αυτά που μπορούν να συμβούν. Η τοπική κοινωνία έχει ευαισθητοποιηθεί. Εμείς ως Δήμος Καλαμάτας είχαμε φτιάξει το φαγητό το βραδινό, αλλά αθλητικός φορέας, αθλητικός σύλλογος της περιοχής έφερε πριν από λίγο 160 μερίδες μέσω catering για να μπορέσει να τις προσφέρει στον κόσμο. Και έχω δεχτεί πάρα πολλά τηλέφωνα για επιχειρήσεις της περιοχής μας να μας φέρουν ρούχα, να μας φέρουν οτιδήποτε χρειαζόμαστε, να μας φέρουν φαγητό για αύριο το μεσημέρι. Όλοι έχουν αντιδράσει θετικά, δηλαδή έχουν ευαισθητοποιημένοι.
The shipwreck is the deadliest off Greek shores this year, prompting the country to declare 3 days of national mourning.
Πρακτικά η σκέψη μας είναι μαζί όταν συμβαίνει κάτι τέτοιο. Δεν θέλουμε να έχουμε νεκρούς ούτε στο μέρος μας ούτε πουθενά. Οι άνθρωποι έχουν δικαίωμα να έρχονται στη χώρα μας και στην Ευρώπη και πρέπει να τους φροντίζουμε. Είναι απίστευτο το πώς με 2 μποφόρ μπορεί να έγινε όλο αυτό το κακό. Εύχομαι να βρουν όσο γίνεται περισσότερους ανθρώπους σε καλή κατάσταση και όσο γίνεται να δείξουμε την ανθρωπιά μας και εμείς από εδώ και να βοηθήσουμε με όποιο τρόπο μπορούμε.
Μόλις οι πρώτοι διασωθέντες μεταφέρθηκαν στο λιμάνι της Καλαμάτας, εδώ βρέθηκαν και αρκετοί πολίτες που προσέφεραν ρούχα, τρόφιμα και φάρμακα. Στο πλευρό των μεταναστών βρίσκονται ψυχολόγοι που όμως δεν μπορούν να απαντήσουν στο επίμονο ερώτημα των διασωθέντων: τι έγινε, πού βρίσκονται οι δικοί μας άνθρωποι. Από την Καλαμάτα και το Euronews, Απόστολος Τάικος.
The UK's former Prime Minister Boris Johnson deliberately misled lawmakers and would have been banned from Parliament's lower house if he hadn't resigned last week. A scathing report from the House of Commons Privileges Committee found Johnson had lied about holding parties during the pandemic lockdown. He stood down as an MP on Friday ahead of the publication of the damning report.
You know the national anthem.
It's the culmination of a year-long investigation into Johnson's conduct during the pandemic, which also found he was complicit in the campaign of abuse and attempted intimidation of the committee. It's the latest episode in the so-called Partygate scandal, which revealed members of Johnson's staff held a series of parties in 2020 and 2021 when such gatherings were prohibited by pandemic restrictions. Johnson dismissed the committee as a kangaroo court, which hadn't looked at the facts. Trucks with Serbian number plates are being stopped from entering Kosovo, regardless of whether they're empty or carrying goods. Passenger traffic is proceeding as normal. It follows suspicion Serbian forces kidnapped 3 policemen in Kosovan territory. Kidnapping's been used as a method of protecting criminals in the past.
Odluka o zabrani uvoza srpske robe usledila je nakon hapšenja 3 policajaca kosovskih od strane srpskog MUP-a, za koje kosovske institucije tvrde da su kidnapovani na teritoriji Kosova, a srpske institucije da su uhapšeni duboko na teritoriji centralne Srbije.
Drivers are frustrated.
Reci mi, koliko čekaš?
Od 8 jučer.
Tvoje ime?
20, Gazmen Kasafi.
Gazmene, ti pretpostavljam od ovoga živiš, od ove vožnje. Šta za ovo tebe znači?
Pa, to je potrebno za mene. Ako nije potrebno, ne bi došao. To mi je rad. Za toga se hranim decu i familiju i to sve.
Šta ovo znači za vas? Pretpostavljam da živite od ovoga.
Gubitak. Gubitak i novca i vremena i živaca. Naprimer, sutra sam trebao da otvorim za Holandiju iz Vranjske banje. Morao sam da otkažem. Tako. Šta da vam kažem?
After the session of the National Security Council of Kosovo, Prime Minister Albin Kurti and Minister of the Interior Celal Švecla confirmed the decision would remain in force for now.
The European Central Bank has raised interest rates by 0.25% as inflation continues to weigh on the Eurozone economy. It's the 8th straight increase since July last year as the central bank struggles to contain surging consumer costs. Inflation has fallen in some sectors, but the ECB is not ruling out further interest hikes.
Our future decisions will ensure that the key ECB interest rates will be brought to levels sufficiently restrictive to achieve a timely return of inflation to our 2% medium-term target, and will be kept at those levels for as long as necessary.
Inflation has fallen from a peak 10% to just over 6%, but core inflation, which strips out food and energy costs, has eased only slightly. Historically low unemployment rates have mitigated the impact of Europe's economy, but the ECB has nonetheless revised down its growth forecast for 2023 to 0.9%. Future support for Ukraine. This is what NATO defence ministers are discussing in Brussels against the backdrop of Ukraine's widely anticipated counter-offensive to expel Russian troops from its territory. Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said tanks and armoured vehicles sent by NATO are taking part in, quote, making a difference on the battlefield. The US Defence Secretary added that support for Kyiv will continue.
We will continue to provide Ukraine with the urgent capabilities that it needs to meet this moment, as well as what it needs to keep itself secure for the long term from Russian aggression. And make no mistake, we will stand with Ukraine for the long haul.
Ukraine's aspirations to join NATO will have to wait, since there is no consensus among the members of the alliance. The appointment overlaps with another from the so-called Contact Group for Ukraine, which brings together NATO and a dozen allied countries. The breach of the Kharkovka Dam in Ukraine has flooded dozens of villages and towns on both banks of the Dnipro River. Millions of tons of debris, sediment, oil and pesticide-contaminated sludge are now flowing south towards the Black Sea. Experts fear this gigantic wave of sediment will hit the shores of neighbouring countries this summer.
Și la momentul la care va ajunge apa, să spunem, încărcată cu sedimente și nutrienți, va ajunge prima dată în zona de nord a litoralului, zona gurilor Dunării, Sulina, Chilia, Sulina, Sfântul Gheorghe, după care, la fel cum se vede și în cazul Dunării, cum sedimentele sunt transportate de curenți către sudul litoralului, la fel și apa contaminată din Ucraina va veni și se va amesteca, combina cu cea de la Dunăre și va coborî către sudul litoralului. Acei nutrienți vor stimula algele fitopantoice, vor genera înfloriri, va avea loc o scădere a calității apelor de îmbăiere, probabil o scădere a salinității, vom avea ape, să zicem, netransparente, vom avea o apă verde sau maro, depinde de speciile care vor înflori.
The population's concern is evident in countries like Romania, where some are already thinking about the long-term consequences.
Un adevărat dezastru ecologic, cred.
Ai mai avea curajul să intri în apă?
Nu, categoric nu cred.
But in neighbouring Bulgaria, the Institute of Oceanology says it is unlikely that the debris wave will reach serious concentrations on its shores. People seem confident.
Допускаме, че няма да стигне до България. Казаха, че щяло да остане до Румъния някъде.
However, contamination due to toxic or hazardous waste is not the only risk for coastal countries. The gigantic wave of waste heading for them could also wash up mines, endangering ships sailing in their waters.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Chilean President Gabriel Boric have agreed a deal on lithium to make electric vehicle batteries. Chile is estimated to have more than a third of the world's reserves of lithium. The European Commission has pledged €225 million to help the country develop the green hydrogen industry and help secure Europe's demands for renewable energy. The visit takes place 1 month ahead of the EU Select Summit, focusing on cooperation between the EU, Latin America and the Caribbean. Austria is to close down its oldest still printed daily newspaper. The Wiener Zeitung belongs to the Republic and is described as quality press. But after the 30th of June, it will be published primarily online. The editorial team is unhappy as the move will lead to many job losses.
Die Wiener Zeitung gibt es seit 1703. Wir hätten heuer im Sommer unser 320-jähriges Jubiläum gefeiert. Und diese Zeitung hat einfach sehr, sehr viele Dinge begleitet, auch als Zeitzeugin. Der Text der Menschenrechtserklärung wurde hier abgedruckt. Es haben große Persönlichkeiten wie Mozart und Beethoven hier inseriert. Und es ist einfach auch ein historisches Bewusstsein, das ich in der Politik vermisse.
The government decided to stop the daily print edition, claiming a new EU directive now restricts the newspaper's main source of income, the so-called mandatory publication.
Die Pflichtveröffentlichung bedeutet, dass Unternehmerinnen und Unternehmer ihren Jahresabschluss in der Wiener Zeitung veröffentlichen mussten, dafür gezahlt haben, und das wird es in Zukunft in der Form nicht mehr geben, in der Finanzierungsform, und daher musste die Finanzierung verändert werden.
In den letzten 5 Jahren ist Österreich im internationalen Pressefreiheitsranking vom Rang 11 auf Rang 29 abgestürzt. Nicht nur wegen der schrumpfenden Zahl an Tagesblättern, es wird auch angeklagt, dass die Regierung gezielt Inserate in Medien finanziert, um die Berichterstattung zu beeinflussen. Johannes Bleschberger, Euronews, Wien.